In every great library, there is a collection that is not on any public record, called ours, the Liber Damnatus, the damned books. Most were just heretical texts, political treatises. But one was different. We called it the Crimson Manuscript. The story, the real one, is that it's an alchemical text from the 17th century. But the binding is not calfskin, it's human. It's the skin of the author himself. It's a heretic named Cain, who believed he could achieve immortality by imprisoning his soul within his own flesh. For 60 years, my job was to keep that book locked away to ensure no one ever read it. Because the legend says that Cain did not fail. His soul is in that book, and he is not a prisoner. He is a predator. He is waiting for a new reader, a new mind to consume, a new voice to add to his collection. I am telling this story now because I am old, and I have heard that another ambitious young academic has been granted access to the restricted archives. I can only pray he does not find the book that is bound in skin and ink and endless silent screams. Research log, Day 1. Dr. Elias Vance. I have finally been granted access to the university's restricted collection, a career-making opportunity. Most of it is exactly what you'd expect: censored political texts, early anatomical studies. But in a locked sub-archive, I found it. It's a single, unlabeled volume that wasn't on any official manifest. It was bound in a strange, pale, vellum-like material. It felt wrong, almost warm to the touch. The pages were filled with handwritten, alchemical notes and complex esoteric diagrams, all written in a strange, brownish red ink. It was the discovery of a lifetime, a completely unknown primary source alchemical text. I felt a thrill of pure academic adrenaline. I checked the book out under my own authority, taking it back to my private study. I was blinded by ambition. I saw a forgotten masterpiece. I didn't see the trap. The first anomaly was the ink. I was in my study, transcribing the first few pages. The text was bizarre, a mix of Latin and a coded cipher I didn't recognize. I left my desk for a moment to make coffee. When I came back, a word on the page had changed. I was certain it had read anima, the soul. Now, it read cars, the prison. I stared at it, my mind refusing to accept what my eyes were seeing. I thought I was just exhausted, my brain playing tricks. I took a high-resolution photo of the page with my phone to document it. Hey, as I watched the screen, I saw it happen. On the phone's display, the tiny, hair-thin lines of the crimson ink seemed to slowly, possibly writhe and reform like microscopic worms, changing one word into another. This wasn't old, faded ink. It was something active, something alive. After that, the presence made itself known. It started with the smell, strange, coppery scent, like old blood, mixed with the dry, dusty smell of old parchment and iron gall ink. It would fill my study for a few minutes, then vanish. Then came the sounds, a faint, rhythmic scratch, scratch, scratch of a quill pen on paper, coming from the corner of the room where my own hands were perfectly still. One night, I was working late, and I felt a sudden, intense cold. I looked at the dark wood of my antique desk. A fresh, dark, wet ink blot had just appeared on the surface, as if a drop had just fallen from an unseen pen. As I watched, a single, ghostly wisp of steam rose from the fresh ink, and the blot slowly dried and faded into nothing. He was there, the author, the scribe. He wasn't just in the book anymore. He was in my room. I had to know what the binding was. The academic mind needed a rational explanation. I took a minuscule sample and brought it to a colleague in the biology department, telling her it was from a rare medieval manuscript. I waited in her lab. Smell of formaldehyde, a welcome relief from the phantom scent of ink. She came back a few hours later, her face pale, her professional demeanor gone. "Elias," she said, her voice a strained whisper. "The sample you gave me, the collagen and keratin structure is unmistakable. This isn't vellum. It's not animal hide." She couldn't meet my eyes. "It's human skin." The floor seemed to drop out from under me. The book wasn't just a text. It was a relic. It was a tomb. And I had been sleeping with it in my house. I finally understood the curator's warning. The author hadn't just written the book. Here was the book. The haunting turned inward. My body became the new page. It started with a small, spider-like bruise on my forearm. But it wasn't a bruise. It was a dark, inky stain under my skin. Within days, more appeared. It looked like dark, inky veins, spreading slowly up my arm from my fingertips, the fingers I used to turn the pages. They didn't hurt. They were just there, a physical manifestation of the book's influence. I started having nightmares, not of monsters, but of being in a dark, silent room, unable to move, while a shadowy figure stood over me, writing on my skin with a quill that scratched but never broke the surface. I was becoming part of the text. My own body was becoming a living document of his story, and I felt my own story, my own thoughts, starting to fade. One night, I was in my study, staring at the book, which was lying open on my desk. The page was blank. A perfectly empty, creamy white page that I had never seen before. As I watched, the ghost appeared, the scribe. He was a tall, gaunt figure in dark robes, his face a mask of shadow, but his long, ink-stained fingers were horrifyingly real. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the blank page. "Ha!" He raised one long finger and pointed at the empty page, and then turned and pointed at me. The invitation was clear. He didn't want to just haunt me. He wanted me to contribute, to add my own knowledge, my own soul to his collection. The book wasn't a history. It was a living, growing thing, and it was hungry for a new chapter. I refused. I shut the book, locked it in a metal box. But it didn't matter. The next night, I found it on my desk again, open to that same damningly blank page. And next to it was my own favorite fountain pen. I felt an overwhelming, unnatural compulsion to pick it up. My hand moved against my will. I was being possessed, my body forced towards the desk. I fought it with every ounce of my being, my muscles screaming in protest. As my hand hovered over the blank page, I saw the text from the previous page begin to glow with a faint crimson light. It was the final entry from the previous reader, a historian from the 1920s who had also studied the book and then vanished. His final, frantic entry read, "He does not want my knowledge. He wants my skin. The book is not the vessel. It is the cage, okay? And there is no final page." The entry cut off mid-sentence, and I finally understood the true, monstrous nature of his collection. In a final burst of adrenaline, I broke free and ran, not out of the house, but back to the university archive. I had to know. I broke into the restricted sub-archive, the one where I had found the manuscript. I looked at the empty space on the shelf, and then I looked at the books next to it. There were 5 of them, all bound in the same pale, skin-like material, but each a slightly different shade. One was darker, one was more freckled. One had a faint, circular scar near the spine. They weren't copies, they were a set, a collection. The Crimson Manuscript wasn't a single book, it was volume 1. The others were the previous readers, the previous victims, their knowledge, their souls, and their very skin, turned into new volumes for a dead man's library. I wasn't just being haunted, I was being harvested. I knew what I had to do. I gathered all the books, took them to the university's old stone incinerator room. I doused them in accelerant and threw in a match. The The fire roared to life. But the books didn't burn. The flames licked at the skin bindings, but left them completely untouched. Instead, the air filled with the sound of hundreds of whispering, screaming voices, the voices of all the trapped souls. The ghostly figures of the previous victims, including the scribe himself, materialized from the smoke and flames. Their forms twisted in agony and rage. They swarmed towards me, not to harm me, but to protect their prison, to protect their master. I was surrounded by a legion of the damned. Their collective will focused on preserving the collection. You cannot burn a story that is already in hell. The official story is that I had a mental breakdown, that I started the fire in the archives and then simply disappeared. They never found a body. The books, miraculously undamaged, were locked away in an even deeper, more secure vault. A year later, the old curator, the one from the intro, was doing a final inventory before his retirement. He went to check on the collection, and he found a new volume. There, on the shelf next to the Crimson Manuscript, was another book he had never seen before. It was bound in a pale, familiar-looking skin on the spine. Written in a fresh, dark, crimson ink. This was the title, A History of Alchemical Texts by Dr. E. Vance. The collection was now complete, okay? And somewhere in a silent, leather-bound prison, my story was finally, truly finished.